My guy Josh.
Yo, Brandon.
How you doing?
Doing well. Can't complain.
Allow you to introduce yourself.
My name's Josh Dehonney. I'm a photographer, born and raised in Toronto. Been living in New Jersey for the last 15 years or so, and I love it.
So I never asked you, how did you come to the US? Because you're from Toronto.
Good question. I'd always kind of wanted to be here. My dad is an American citizen. I traveled a lot between Toronto and Pittsburgh growing up, almost on a weekly basis in some cases. So when the time came and I was legal age, I applied for my citizenship through my dad. That took a long time. For anybody ever curious or wondering how Canadian people get here legally, it's not easy. It wasn't as easy as just filling out some forms. This was pre-internet, so I had to fill out a lot of forms at the embassy and go back and forth, and that was a little tricky. But anyway, it took about 2 years before I got my citizenship, and as soon as I did, I got everything together. After college, I packed my bags up, I brought that camera with me, and I came to New York City.
And how old were you?
I was about 20,
20. And you went to New York.
20, 21.
Did you have a place to stay when you arrived in New York?
I did, so I had a tenant. My mom rented a room to a guy named Nick, a Jamaican guy, and we became homies. He was exactly my age. We went to the same school. And he had a girlfriend who lived at 233rd and White Plains in the Bronx. So I wanted to go to New York. I didn't need, like, this is really before you really even had internet access at home. I was just trying to go. This is 2000 or so, right? Yeah. I was just trying to go. So he told me where to meet her on a piece of paper. I met her at 233rd and White Plains in the Bronx, January 3rd, 2000 or so, 3rd or 4th. And that's where I stayed. That's where I got started. And about a month after that, her mom offered me an apartment at 231st White Plains in the Bronx. And from there, I rented out the apartment and kind of went from there.
So how did you get into photography?
Well, from graffiti, straight up. Graffiti and National Geographic. My mom had a subscription to National Geographic always. They were always around. I always loved looking through it. I loved the photos in it because a lot of the words were too big for me at the time. So I just spent a ton of time looking at the pictures. As I got older, as you can see, I always have something to write with nearby. I started with graffiti. I was always a graffiti writer, and I had to take pictures of the graffiti. So I got handy with the camera. Come ninth grade, fell in love with photo that way because I went to a collegiate vocational institute and I got hands-on with everything. Never looked back.
Okay, so you started in ninth grade, so about 14 years old.
Yeah.
And at that time, you said, I'm going to be a photographer? Like that?
I don't know if that was the case. I knew I was going to be an artist.
Okay.
At that time, we were making videos. Matter of fact, just for fun, just for jokes, the very first video I ever cut is right here. I'm just trying to get it, digitized. Yeah. But I was always trying to create visually, like it says on my website, like just even like quote some of the stuff I've said, but I've always wanted to create visually. Like I love words. Hunter S. Thompson's a huge inspiration of mine, and his approach was always gonzo and just like go get it, go do it, right? So just write it down, just shoot it, just do it, and then figure it out later. Like say yes and figure it out later. Like that's kind of been an approach I've had since learning about art and Hunter S. Thompson is that if you love it, just do it.
It's amazing you still have that footage, like to hold on to that tape for so many years and move in so many places and all of that stuff. And just to give you like a real proper introduction, you are my mentor.
No, man, thank you.
So everything I know about the photo industry, being a commercial photographer, being a professional photographer, and like you said, just going and getting it, came from you.
Thanks, man. I appreciate that.
And how did a lot of those stories that you taught me through came from your time at the Pier.
Yep.
And how did you come to work at the Pier?
That's a good question. So I was interning at Fast Ashley's. I was working for free. I was working at Tennessee Mountain, slanging ribs during the week. And then for real, if anybody remembers Tennessee Mountain, that was at Spring Street, and man, that was a classic restaurant owned by Alan Fleischman of the Fleischman family from Manhattan, and they were leasing that restaurant, as far as I remember, and please, don't quote me for sure, $2,500 a month or something like this. This is down in the fashion district, and there was a rib restaurant right where I think there's a Crocs there now, but anyway. That's where I worked, and whenever I could, I took shifts at Fast Ashley's, which was just getting started at the time. And I was painting Sykes with Josh Moore, who was my mentor, and it was a big deal. So while working there, Josh Moore had me on set, and I met a guy named Sean McCullough. And Sean said to me, he saw me like really working hard and busting out. And he said, "Yo, my G, are you really about it?" And I said, "Yeah." And he said, "Meet me here tomorrow." And it was Pier 59. I was like, "Oh my goodness, well, that's a big deal." So he introduced me to Loris. Big shout out to Loris. He's a big help for me. And Loris gave me an interview, and I got down with the Pier from there.
How long did you work at the Pier?
About 10 years.
10 years.
Yeah.
Wow.
Off and on. I'm going to say, let's stretch it. Let's be realistic. More like 9.
Okay.
But I like to say 10 because it sounds a bit better.
What were your jobs at the Pier?
So I started night shift, and the night shift was so big, man. Like, these were the days of big jobs and big film and like tons of energy behind one frame and one 4x5 and one 8x10. Somewhere around here, I have 8x10s of the Rolling Stones. And this was one of my most like memorable jobs of all time. Like it went till 3, 4 in the morning, and they were shooting the Rolling Stones on 8x10s. It was Stephen Klein, and there were hundreds of people involved in this photo shoot that went down for Rolling Stone, as far as I remember. But the energy that went behind each frame, I wasn't in the studio when his finger touched the button that ultimately created the photo. I wasn't in the actual studio, but I was in Pier 59 when it happened, and I swear I could feel it. You know what I'm saying? I know that sounds like a crazy thing to say, but Josh Moore told me something really important when we were setting up stands at Fast Ashley's. He's like, you know, excuse me, I'm
You getting choked up about
just
it.
Even talking about it. Just going back. You can record it, but you got to pause just for a second. This is a big deal. Even tying the C-stand down, you were a big part of it.
Yeah.
You got me up there. Sorry, I don't really cry that often. But seeing I just shot my last wedding and everything, it was a long journey to get. Bro, I came here with this 35mm camera. You know what I'm saying? I got it. So just give me a second. It's a big deal. Anyway, I'll catch up. You can cut that however you want. You know, he instilled in me, like, set the C-stands up right. You're not getting paid shit. Just make sure you do this job right. Set those C-stands up in the corner. Make sure every knob is facing in the right direction. They don't give a shit about you. This is a big deal. I'm going to come in here, and the guy's going to come in here in the morning. He's getting paid a lot of money. You better make sure those C-stands are right. Every knob going in the right direction. And if you don't do it right, that looks bad on me. And I wasn't getting paid anything. So that was a big deal. And these were test shoots at Fast Ashley. That meant shit meant nothing to me. But it meant everything to me. It meant nothing to them that it meant everything to me. But I made sure that I put everything, make sure that C-stand is locked down.
Yeah.
That meant a lot to me. I just locked it. Sorry, let me get some water. That meant a lot to me. Like locking C-stands down, the most basic part of it, goes a long way. You know what I mean?
Yeah. What is he up to now? What is Josh up to now?
As far as I know, Josh Moore. So another part of that story, Josh Moore does. I think he's involved with coding. Prescott McDonald, R.I.P. Josh and Prescott worked at Fast Ashley's, and Prescott put me on. He put me on to a lot of assisting jobs, and just in a side note, it was interesting. Josh Moore was also a mixed race brother like myself, and we kind of worked together and pooled together all the black people, all the black photo assistants, photographers we could at the time. So that was kind of cool. Sean McCullough, big up to Sean. He who put me on. He's another brother. He went on to work at Rikers Island. On a side note to that, he was an awesome photographer, but. Yeah, sorry if I'm rambling too much to talk and the emotional part, but you know, like how I got started, how you know, it meant a lot to be an intern on these jobs. So I never let go of, like, no matter who the next guy is, you just make sure that C-stand's locked down tight. Yeah. You make sure those C-stands are nice, and when it's your turn, you'll get the opportunity.
And even when I did my first big commercial shoot, I was fortunate to have you on set with me, and you took the pride and that same excitement, because you was just like, everything that I'm doing, because you were sitting by the pack and just working the pack, and you was just like, I'm here, I'm helping create this image, I'm a part of this, like me sitting on this apple box next to this pack, like I'm a big part of that.
Right.
And that job was, you know, 30 plus people on set, big client, big money for me relatively, and you just helped guide me through that whole process. Like I remember, you know, times where I was in the corner just a little lost or being timid, not lost, but just being timid, just kind of peeping everything. You know, you would come up and just whisper in my ear, go talk to the client. Right. Go over here and just make sure they see you, make sure you be present. So what I took from that is you picked up so much from those days at the pier, seeing people do it at the highest level because you were working for the top 5% in the world. What takeaways do you have from that time? I mean, I know it's too many to get into, but just give me like, your top 3 or whatever.
I would say my one of my biggest takeaways from my photo mentor, who was Kip Meyer, was interacting even while you're shooting was always a big thing to me, and in just connecting with people, like the connection has to be there. There has to be some intermediary between you and the client and the subject, and that's the camera, and you have to break that down a bit and find a way to connect and be with the subject. And even when Kip was shooting, you look beautiful, like talking through the camera, like while you're shooting, encouraging. And you should at that point know, which I guess is my second point, the camera at that point should be an extension of your arm. To quote Dorothea Lange, who is one of my personal favorite photographers. I know that sounds a little cliche, but she's also known for saying some awesome things. And one of them is that just that the camera should be an extension of your arm. I'll move this whole guy out of the way, but at that point you have everything ready to go. You have everything set. All you need to do is connect and be with the client and or be with the subject, and the rest kind of like makes itself happen. So just being there, being present, and not worrying about all the other stuff, not worrying about how big the studio is or if everything's there. You just do it, and that was a big takeaway from being involved.
From Kip.
From Kip, yeah.
Did Kip shoot at the pier?
Not often, no. I think maybe once or twice we shot there, but yeah, he had other studios.
So Kip is a photographer that you constantly reference when you teach me things.
Yep.
Kip told me this, Kip did this, Kip did that. How much time did you work with Kip, and how did you meet Kip?
6 years. So prior to working with Kip, I worked for another photographer who focused on interiors and landscapes. His name is Eric Piasecki. His biggest client was Martha Stewart and Restoration Hardware. And I just kind of wanted to move on, and another assistant said, hey, I'll introduce you to Kip. And Kip was doing a little bit more fashion, lifestyle, and portrait, and that was a little bit more up my alley. So I said, hey, I'll be happy to assist you as often as possible. And it was a great partnership, and we worked together for about 6 years, all over the place. We traveled all over.
After the pier?
No, during the pier. So I was a freelance photo assistant. So
okay.
I would take shifts at the pier during the week for 3-4 days, and then I would work with him on the weekends, and I would come and go from the pier. The pier is exclusively freelance. Like, I was not a salaried employee there. So during the winter, I would work January, February, March, because those months were typically pretty slow.
Why did you stop at the pier?
As a creative, I don't want to get cliche here, but you got to close one door to open another. I know that sounds crazy, but you just sort of have to move on. You have to let things go. And as I sit here, as I got emotional, I this past weekend, I had my last scheduled wedding. It might not be my last wedding ever, but as of right now, it's the last one I have planned. And it's something that you kind of have to move on from. I got used to getting paid from the pier. I got used to that bi-weekly paycheck, and that was a comfort that as an artist you just kind of have to get used to not having anymore. So I moved on from the pier to assist exclusively, and then I did that for a couple years while I transitioned to becoming a self-sustaining professional photographer, because that was always my goal. Working for somebody else is fun, but it's never been something that has necessarily worked for me. I've tried in the past, but I've always wanted to be self-sustaining.
I understand that. And we had those talks a lot when I was first starting out, because I did not come from the traditional assistant route.
Yep.
And, you always told me at some point, you have to get out there, you have to hang your own shingle, you have to, do your own thing. In those early days, what were you shooting?
As anything I could. So that's what's tricky about photography and being a professional photographer in this day and age, is that as much as you want to adhere to some sort of brand and brand image, and I just do this and I only do that, of course I only wanted to do fashion, portrait, lifestyle, and that sort of thing, but that absolutely is not realistic. So I've always been into sneakers, kicks, and fashion. I partnered with friends a long time ago. Big shout out to Lou Cologne. If this ever gets out there, I got to pay Louis Cologne a lot of respect. He gave me a lot of opportunities to shoot for his magazine. And again, I'll go ahead and get emotional there. I'll stop. But Kick Exclusive put me on, and I learned to shoot still life that way. So I would take any still life opportunity that came my way, any interior project, any landscape. It was, again, back to one of the first things I said here, was like, say yes and figure it out later. I'm a photographer. I think visually. I want to create. The client has a problem. How can I solve it? That's something that always has to be back in mind whenever you're approaching anything creative or visually, because the reality is, if you're an artist, you can't just always think art. Yeah, I mean, that's where your heart is, and that's where your passion comes from, the art. But the reality is, if you ever want to make money from that, you have to figure out a way to get money out of people's bank accounts and put it in yours and make that work somehow. And that's always the struggle with any artist, right? No matter what your art is, whether it's music or knitting or photography or video, they all have their same struggles, in that you have a passion to create what you love, but that might not necessarily translate to a bigger commercial picture. So finding parts of what you love and then packaging it so the commercial world can take a part of it is the ideal goal. So saying yes to everything, saying, yeah, I'll try that. Some stuff I shot was garbage. Some stuff was okay. I have learned my lesson on interiors. I'm not a very good interior photographer. I don't like real estate photography. I've tried. As of late, a friend of mine, we've partnered. He's quite good at it. I like flying the drone. I'll fly the drone. You shoot the inside. I'll shoot the outside.
Okay.
So, I've learned with stuff I'm good at. And, when people ask me nowadays, like, what do you photograph? I often say, I'll photograph just about anything but babies in baskets, because that's not something that speaks to me, right? I've learned the stuff I like, what I don't like, what works and what doesn't work. And that has come through a process of elimination and exploration.
Yeah, and that's one of the bigger lessons you taught me, was just mixing art and commerce.
Right.
And when you look at art history all the way back to like Renaissance painters and sculptors, everything, that's the struggle artists have always had, is just mixing that art and commerce together.
Yep.
So I appreciate you for teaching me that lesson.
Yep.
At some point, you alluded to that you've shot your last wedding recently. When was weddings introduced to you, and how did you get started in that field?
Oh, good question. So, about 15 years ago, my wife and I, this was about 2007, 2008, around the financial crisis. Around that time, assisting jobs started to slow up. My then girlfriend, now wife, and I had a plan to move forward in life, have a house and a family. And it didn't seem at that time like assisting and my transition to being a New York City fashion photographer was going to go as planned. So I jumped on Craigslist. I put a portfolio together and advertised for weddings. And, this is an awesome story that I'm so proud to tell. I drove from Jersey City in a 98 gray Ford Escort. I drove from Jersey City to Delaware with one camera and one lens and one flash for $500. And I shot a 10-hour wedding. And I came back and I felt like $1 million. And my wife and I, we looked at the $500 on the table, like, oh my goodness, this is amazing. We're going to put it together. We're going to pay some bills. We're going to get a sandwich tomorrow. And it was amazing. I delivered the wedding on JPEG, TIFF, and I think I even gave them the raw files on a disc, which somewhere I have sitting around here today, because I keep everything. I'm a pack rat. But I was so thankful to have that opportunity. And then here's a really awesome story. The bride's sister reached out for me to photograph her wedding a couple weeks later in Delaware. I said, hell yeah, I'm going to do it. So I brought one camera with me and had one camera and one lens again. I went down to shoot the wedding in Delaware. Everything's going fine. Camera dies. Oh my goodness. I can't believe it. My second or third wedding camera's just kaput. I'm like, oh my goodness. The girl next to me has a Canon EOS Rebel. I've got one of these 24-70 lenses. I said, can I borrow your camera right now? I'm having a bit of a problem. We swap out, and I pretend like nothing happened. Everyone's acting like, they don't even know what's going on. Thankfully, this was happening in not a very fancy place, and we had good proximity to a Walmart. So in between, I ran in and I hustled and I bought myself a Canon EOS Rebel, made it back to the wedding in time. Nobody knew a thing. Everything went off fine. They left a positive review for me many months later. So anyway, I learned my lesson from that one, and I never left the house without 3 bodies ever since then.
Wow. Okay. So what was the emotions and the mental mindset when you're transitioning from fashion to weddings? Because I think now weddings have a weird tone when professional photographers speak about them.
Yeah.
But back then, this is kind of like when the wedding celebrity photographer was really on the rise.
Yeah.
So it was kind of like cool to shoot weddings during a certain time. What feelings were you going through during that transition?
Well, funny you should mention, because that did happen. There was a point where there were like rock star wedding photographers that people, were fanning for, couldn't get enough of. Their Instagrams blew up, and I think Instagram and social media played a huge part in that. I'm happy to see that. I'm happy to see people get success, and that was great. For me though, there was a tricky transition because you have a mentality like, coming from like a New York City fashion background, ultimately you want to get work printed, right? Like that's your kind of like mentality. So you kind of like even though it may not ultimately end up in Times Square on a magazine, you kind of have that heart set, like that mindset that you always want to have the best outcome for your images, right? Like somebody's coming to you and they want this for the cover of the magazine. Now that's never the case usually, of course, when it is, but you always have that approach. So when you are coming from that mentality and you're looking at a wedding and it's never going to be that way, you have to kind of break down the mental, you're like your own ego involved there and say, this isn't for the world, this is for them. And that was something I had to learn early on, and that like a lot of people weren't willing to share all of their photos or even any of them, because you're creating work for the client, specifically for this family. And I think one of the most important lessons I learned from weddings was this is a wedding for the family. This is for them. So you're creating artwork for them. So don't worry about what the rest of the world thinks, and don't worry about your brand and what your portfolio stands to gain from this and what you can stand to gain, because you're lucky enough that this family hired you to create art. So you apply your art to this, apply the principles of photography, do what they asked you to do, and put your own spin on it and have some fun. And you'll be successful at wedding photography, in my approach, if you can figure out a way to leave everything else beside and connect with the art and the family.
You're in New York.
Yes, sir.
You transitioned to shooting weddings. At what point did you leave New York? How many years did you live there, and you later moved to Jersey? Or you were already living in Jersey City?
We were living in Jersey City, yeah.
So now you live in, I forget what county this is.
We're in Mercer County, but we moved from Jersey City to Hamilton. And I guess, so Jalen was born my son, 2011. So 2009, we moved from Jersey City to Hamilton.
Okay. And now you're about, what, an hour from New York, maybe?
Yeah, about that.
An hour from New York? Mm-hmm. What did you go through mentally as you're moving further and further away from this destination that was such a big part of your photographic journey? Because I feel a lot of people go through that.
Yeah.
Living in Jersey, Philadelphia, all of the surrounding area. You're so close to the capital and the mecca of what we want to do, and life and other decisions sometimes takes you further and further away.
Yeah, sure. That's a super good question. And I guess this one sort of spans beyond photography into a New York City mindset, right? Like it is a real New York state of mind in that, and with all due respect to the greatest city in the world, I think New York is absolutely amazing, but it's not the only city in the world. And I think I am guilty of thinking that you can't exist outside of New York, and that there are no projects outside of New York, and the biggest things happen there. And yeah, it's true. Tends to be the case that the biggest stuff does happen there, but there are opportunities, there is art, and there are people paying for photography and making things happen outside of New York. And that was part of the hard kind of like mindset to get over, is that once you move out of New York City, you have access to it, but out of sight is out of mind. And that's a lesson I learned early in photography, is that as soon as you're gone, they're going to find somebody else, right? If you're not quite literally in arm's reach, and I mean like you are not able to touch people you want to work with, it's likely they're going to find other people to work with. No matter how amazing and talented you are, and how good you are at your job and how good your photos are, if you're not there and you're not present in New York, they're going to find someone else, right? They may have you back from time to time, but being there is the most important part. So it was important to find new opportunities and make new things happen, like create a new path, open new doors, and see what's on the other side. And that's totally terrifying for any artist leaving a major city. And because you get used to it, you get used to the spoils. Like one of my favorite things about shooting in the city is, no worries, we'll just get it messenger, bring it over, right? Yep. It's broken, you forgot it, oh well. Well, you have to forget that when you go out on a job anywhere around here, you don't have it, you don't have it. That's out. If you didn't pack it, you don't have it. It's not coming to you. So you have to forget that. You have to be ready and be prepared to shoot whatever it is. Be ready, So doing locations and packing up at the pier taught me a lot. With if somebody sends you a list, you triple check that list to make sure, because this team might be going to the middle of nowhere where a super clamp and J hook could save their life. If not in the case, it's on you, bro. So you got to make sure.
Yeah, New York is special in that regard. I just did a photo shoot. I was an assistant on that photo shoot recently, and the makeup artist didn't show up. And in 30 minutes,
had
another makeup artist
Yep.
of equal or better quality. Right. And it's just like
exactly
access, man. Yeah. Access. Yeah. And it's, you can play the game. I'm in New York. My business is based out of there. But sometimes if you can't answer that call and be somewhere in 30 minutes,
it's true.
That's the difference.
Yeah, it's true. It's true.
It's tough. So 15 years, 786 weddings.
Or so. Don't quote me on that exact approximate. I figured oh my God, I was doing the math.
That's about 50 weddings a year.
Yeah, but it's north of 700, but I did not get to 800. You know what I mean? I shot over. I know when I got to the 700 point, I had marked it down. I said, geez, that's a lot. And then over the last few years, I had 86 or so around COVID, between COVID and now. But by 2019, I was at 700.
Okay. 2019, 700 weddings. Yes. 15 years later.
Yeah.
And now you're leaving weddings behind.
Right now, I'm taking it slow. I'm going to take a break. I won't say no to anybody of my clients. If their kids ever get married, I'm going to be there for that. But right now, I'm just going to take it as it comes. I don't have anything scheduled. I haven't been pushing it too hard. I'm just going to take a bit of a break for now, I think is how I'll leave it.
Okay. Just being the person I am.
Yeah.
It's still on your website.
Yes, sir.
You still advertise for it because you're still on the knot. If I Google you, it still says wedding packages.
Yeah.
You're going to be shooting weddings.
Well, here's the thing with wedding photography. You need some momentum for it, right? So one of the things I said earlier about connecting with families is I realize how important that is, because the families are your mini resumes. Every bridesmaid, every best man, all of those guys you're interviewing with, every single wedding you go to. So the vast majority of my weddings over the last many years have come from the same 6 or 7 families. So once those families started to age out and I saw that happening, I saw there aren't any more younger bridesmaids, there aren't any more grooms. The pool of these people, I've noticed their families reached out less for family photos. I recognized then that if I didn't do something to transition my wedding brand and bring it to new set of families, that it just would cease to exist. So I'm very proud of the wedding photos I shot, and I'm super proud to have been connected with all those families. But I realize that unless I push it hard and unless I advertise for it, nobody's going to come looking for me for it.
Okay.
Yeah. So where I put my Google ad dollars, where I spend my money, is advertising for portraits, for sports and dance, and that is where my clicks go. Almost 80% of the clicks to my website come from those facets.
So what's next for you?
More portraits, more sports. I have a plan in mind called Be You, Do You, something like that. I haven't totally figured out the language yet, but just focusing more on people. One thing I've learned from working with all these families over the years is that being individual is important too, and focusing on portraits and people is just where I want to spend more of my time and energy. And a lot more still life. Like, I don't talk about the still life all that much. Probably 50% of my time is spent shooting some sort of still life chemical or widget. My next big step once I move on, some portrait projects I have, is focusing on the polymer industry, which is anything made out of plastic. Like, all of this stuff is polymer based, and at some point or another it all gets photographed. I like shooting small still life stuff. I like widgets. I like that part of it. I like volume still life. So I'll angle a little bit of my advertising dollars towards marketing towards the polymer business, but just more being creative and more having fun with photography.
So just to give some history about us, we met actually shooting weddings because when I first started photography, I wanted to be a wedding photographer, and we were both, I was post-processing and you were freelancing for a wedding company, Illuminata Photography. It's photography that's no longer in business.
Yeah.
And when I met you, just casual talking, kicking it, I instantly realized the wealth of knowledge you had in your head. Like, I was just like, holy crap, this dude is like, we would shoot weddings together, and the stories you would tell me, like, I couldn't believe. And part of me realizing that wedding photography was not for me and transitioning into commercial fashion was just understanding and knowing it was possible from hearing those stories
Mm-hmm.
from you.
Mm-hmm.
And if I would have never heard those stories on that level, I wouldn't have wrapped my head around it,
Oh,
you know?
nice.
And so, as I said, you're my mentor. How many people do you mentor? Do people look to you for mentoring? And in my mind, you know, people will be like knocking your door over to be like, man, I got to learn from Josh. Because I mean, I would hang out and talk to you to the point where you'd be like, hey, B, I have to go. That was your line, like, hey, B, I have to go. Like, you know, the family's coming home, or I got to hop on this call, or I got to get back to editing. Hey, B, I have to go. And I milk the hell out of that relationship.
Well, I'm thankful you did, because I'm a big fan of community over competition, and by teaching you, I also learn. So that's always something that I you know, my first motivation for all of this art. I went to Trent University to be a teacher because I didn't think that this would ever be possible. That's why I got emotional about some small shit like locking C-stands down, because even simply being able to do that on a photo set was a huge deal from somebody who came from Oshawa, Ontario with a 35mm camera. So the idea of being able to learn so much to teach is a huge, I don't take it lightly. It's no small thing. Being able to pass on what I've learned is the whole point of it. Why are I gonna bottle up the shit I know? That's not for me. And now, having said that, I'm not the type to I know that Skillshare and everybody likes to film everything they do these days and put it online. That to me is less of how I like to transmit and share information. It needs to be more of on a personal note. So in terms of like mentorship and like I said about, you know, kind of like the takeaway from Kip, it's like, be there. You see the art. Like one of the things that I've learned from weddings, and I always tell my second shooters, is don't go in there with your cameras ablazing. Go in there with your mouth blazing. Go talk, learn, laugh, and then start shooting, right? And that's kind of the you know, the approach.
Did you come across a lot of people through your career that you mentored, or?
Oh, not really, to be honest. People always want to, you know, talk and ask lots of questions, but I'm hesitant to share unless I know that it's going to be a worthwhile relationship, kind of both ways, right? So I don't offer it up unless people ask necessarily. I don't mentor anybody else. I'd say you and a couple other folks I've shared and helped along the way, but you're my friend. My other, I would say that I can't take claim. Lewis's brother Jason is a good friend of mine. We've shared. He may say that I've mentored him. I think that he may say the same. But they're friends, and I've learned from you. You have expanded beyond what I could ever imagine in your fashion career and business. Your fashion and your brand and your portraits are so thumbprint and signature, and that makes me happy to see, because one thing I think that I have tried to convey over the years is just how important a thumbprint is. Impact, thumbprint, and momentum, right? And the fact that you are able to do that and keep doing it, no matter how kind of, you know, hard it may get over the years, is amazing. And I love to see it. So I wouldn't have shared it if I didn't think it was going to be worthwhile. Like, I've met people along the way who they're like, yeah, I love it. I'm like, nah. Like it's like that J Electronica song, Exhibit C. You talk the real talk, but you know the energy is real, but I don't feel you. I felt you from the jump. I felt Jalen. You know, if I feel you, then we can work together, and I'm happy to share information in those cases. And so not so many people I've mentored, but you know, I've helped the community grow as far as I like to think anyway.
Yeah, no, big help, definitely. And I'm to the point now in my career where I'm starting to mentor some young photographers.
Exactly.
You know, people reaching out, assisting, and things like that.
Yep.
And I don't want to say I get mad at them, but I feel I'm always interested, because first thing I would do is I'll share some online education, or I'll share a YouTube channel or something. And I just say like, man, I watched that in a week. And I'm checking back in with you 2 months later. I got through one video, I got through 2 videos, and I'm just like, I don't feel it all the time. Right. So, and not to toot my own horn in any way, but what did you see in me that said like, this guy gets it?
The questions you're asking, the type of information you were looking to gather wasn't based on how can I get famous and quick and how can I build my Instagram like that, right? Like you were looking to take the easy route. Because nothing you were asking me earlier, I even remember telling you, like, you were looking photos a big pie, and you're looking to eat from an incredibly small slice of the pie, but you kept trying to eat from the pie. Eventually, you will get a bite from that, right? You will get it if you stick with it, and it does take time. It's not something that's going to happen overnight. And you were asking me questions that were clear that you were trying to build something and not just trying to have a fleeting, like trying to shoot something to be cool, right? Because you could have done that and been that rock star wedding photographer had if you wanted to go that route. But that doesn't speak to you. It's not your true authentic self. And when you find your true authentic self and you know what that is, and you can find the art and you keep doing it over and over and over again, you will find success. My favorite example in a story, not to digress too hard here, but while I'm on it, when I got off the bus in New York City, the first place I went, literally, I got off the bus, it was 3:34 in the morning, and I was going to tattoo Scene. I know, bear with me, it's gonna sound like a crazy story, but I wanted to go see Scene, and the reason was that he's the master, the literal master of doing the same thing over and over and over and over so well, perfectly and identically, universally, that it paid so well. So Richie Scene, if you don't know, the graffiti artist, went on to have a famous tattoo parlor, and he does the same scene over and over and over again. And you're looking like, how could that possibly resonate to photography? What does that make sense? Well, if you can take the same thumbprint photo over and over and over and over again, and people know it's you, and they recognize, like, that's definitely a Brandon Whitesea Stu, that is definitely Brandon's photo, that is definitely a Scene tag, that's the same thing, that is definitely a Rolling Stones song, that is definitely a Rothko. You know when you see it, when you hear it, that's yours. It really doesn't matter. So if you find that one thing that drives you to just do it over and over and over, and you make sure that it's yours, your thumbprint is on it. And Scene was the master of that. I just wanted to go shake his hand. Say, what's up? He talked me out of getting tattoos. This day I don't have any tattoos. I said, Scene, can I get? He said, don't get that. That's beside the point. But I just wanted to see or meet somebody who was just so good at doing the most amazing thing over and got the whole world to see it. So to me, that was a huge inspiration. Now, I practiced my same tag over and over, but what I really wanted to get good at was making art that people knew was mine, and that was going to happen through photography, and finding that thumbprint is a lifelong journey.
That's, we've talked about that many times, because you would sit down and show me like Platoon, you would show me his work.
Great example.
You would show me Martin's work with the close-up faces, and you just like, no matter where it's at, no matter what's on the person, jewelry, whatever the case may be, you recognize the lighting, you recognize the style, and it's the dedication over years to continually just do the work.
Yep, exactly.
So that was a very, very good point. What advice would you have for a photographer just starting out in their career, or maybe somebody in the middle of their career?
Yeah. Keep at it. It's not easy, and one of my favorite quotes from hip hop ever is it's if it's a place worth going, it's a long walk, and it is. It's a long journey. It's checks come and go, money comes and goes, and likes don't count or matter for anything. Sticking with what you love and being dedicated to it is the path to success in photography and in art, in my opinion. If you love it, if you actually love it, everybody will know, because you are going to stick to it, you're going to keep with it, and you're going to make art whether you're getting paid for it or not. And I think that's a big part of it with all art, and at the end of the day, photography isn't art. It's a trade, and the trade is art. And I think some of the best woodworkers and some of the most successful plumbers, if you care to see the plumbing in their house, it's perfect, right? The woodworking in a shop person's house is going to be perfect, guaranteed, right? The shelves at the Walmart, you go to the person who works at Walmart part-time, his shelves might not be so organized, right? So but for me, getting paid to take pictures allows me the opportunity to have some free time to work on my own art. And that is a blessing that I can't put it into words how it feels to have some time off to go take some art and frame it and make a book and share it and learn from it. and give it to the world around me. Ideally, I would like to leave something behind that you know, and this Josh did that, or that's a part of the world that we can remember, you know, you know, starting my whole artistic process as a graffiti writer. And now, like all these years later, I found a sneaky way to get up on people's walls, you know, as a photographer, and it just happened to be through weddings. So, you know.
All right. Thanks a lot, Josh.
Thanks, B.